Goodness me, this day has gone by so quickly, and we are in our penultimate session for day one. Now, we are going to be joined by a panel of experts to discuss governance versus data management. I'm really excited to get into this conversation. So I'd like to welcome my three speakers to the stage, if you would like to join me. Amazing. So great to have you with us here at the Business of Data Festival. Thank you so much for joining us. Now, let's begin by doing a quick 30-second round of introductions. I think would be the best place to start. Tom, welcome to the festival.
Thank you. My name is Tom Natz, Director of Customer Solutions here at Starburst. I've been doing data warehousing, ETL, all that good stuff for more than I'd like to admit, probably 25 plus years. So thanks for having me on.
Yeah, our pleasure. Thank you so much for joining us. Miguel, great to see you. How are you doing? Quick intro.
Hi, Kat. I'm Miguel Sanchez. I'm the Corporate Director for Data and Analytics at Principal Financial Group. I'm responsible for data governance, data architecture, data engineering, artificial intelligence, and advanced analytics. I'm glad to be here.
We are glad to have you. And Margie? Oh, I believe you are on mute, Margie.
Oh, I'm sorry. Am I off mute?
You're good.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. So as I was saying, my name is Margie Lawson. I serve as Vice President of Data Governance, Risk, Communications, and Stewardship up through the Chief Data Officer at MasterCard. So thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure.
No, our pleasure is all ours. Thank you so much for joining. And as a reminder to our audience, please do get your questions in via the question tab. I will be more than happy to put them to our speakers here today. So let's start with a simple question, or potentially a simple question, depending on your organization, which is, whose job is data governance? Nice and simple to start us off. Margie, I'll go to you first.
Perfect. I would say, being a data governance practitioner, it's everyone's job. Anyone who's using data, you have a responsibility to govern that data. Now, it is a central team. It is my central team's function to provide framework and really actually do that day-to-day governance. But our first line of defense really are those data users. So if you're using data, we're hoping that you partner with us to help govern it.
Amazing. Well, here I was thinking you were just going to say me and then move on to the next person, given your title.
No, it's federated.
Love that. Thank you. Miguel, your same question to you. Whose job is data governance?
Data governance is usually a chief data and analytics officer overall responsibility, and it should be directly performed by a role with business background, data privacy knowledge, and data management skill set. But I agree with Margie about that accountability for every single one within the organization is dealing with data.
Amazing. Thank you. And then Tom, same question to you, please.
Yeah, I mean, I think the same. The customers we deal with have the same kind of concept. And like in our software, we have deny all. Like when you first create new data, new objects, it's deny all. So we used to have that way back in the day. I used to work at Comcast many years ago, and we would create new data objects, and by default, nobody has access. So that way, instead of the other way around, giving everybody access and then trying to take it away, it's the other way around. Start with nothing, and then only make sure that you're giving access to people that actually should be seeing the data. So.
Amazing. Thank you so much. Now, the reason we're talking about this, just to give a bit of context, is that it's a bit of a grey area for some who looks after data governance and who looks after data management, if they are in fact the same person, people or function. And I'll put that straight back to each of you as well. When we think data management, who's looking after that? Is it the same people or someone else entirely? Miguel, I'll go to you first for that one.
Yeah, well, in our case, it's a different person. Data management is usually performed by a different person with deep technical and analytics skill set. Data governance role will have a broader responsibility, as it will also deal with transactional and eventually raw data and data with analytic purposes. So that will be coming from different data sources. So the person, at least in our case, is going to be different. So we have two roles, two different people.
Amazing, thank you. Tom, how about yourself? When you're looking at your customers and the market as a whole, do you find often that is, as Miguel said there, someone different, or is it the same people?
Yeah, it's usually data engineers. We have like people that set the standards. Usually in most of the companies I deal with, a lot of pharmaceutical companies too. So they have guidelines that they need to adhere to, which are usually set up by by people, great folks like Marty, sets those up first and make sure that there's rules out there. So you just don't know, you just can't do whatever you want to. So data engineers should be following some sort of practice that's been put in place by some kind of governance body within the company.
Fantastic. Margie, round us off on that one.
So in my world, data governance actually is under the umbrella of data management. But as Miguel and Tom have both said, they are different people, they're different functions. So data management for me is it's a broader set of skills, so to speak. It includes, MDM, RDM, it includes quality, it includes tagging and semantics and data fabric, all of that. Whereas data governance is just a pillar underneath that data management umbrella. The scope is a lot wider for data management than it is within data governance, but they're like cousins for us. They work very closely together. They're very tightly wound together, but they are not held by the same person and they're not the same function. And actually, we don't have a VP of data management per se. We have all of those pieces that I outlined before are all rolled up into that data management and governance function, so to speak.
Amazing. So we've got a good set the scene here, but between each of you. I'm keen to now dive a bit deeper into the implications of what you've just said there regarding who is looking after data governance, who is looking after data management. What does it mean to the actual business, the way that this is set up and the way that you're working? What does that actually have as an impact to the business? Margie, I'll come straight back to you there.
Sure. No, sure. So I think it provides efficiency. We all are sort of locking arms as we collectively manage the data across the organization. And so we're able to, because we're all within the same organization, it makes it easier. We're not fighting or competing for resources. We're not having to reprioritize our things because another entity is prioritizing differently. So for us, it works quite well that we're all within the same group and within the same organization. And it really does help us to sort of paint the picture for the organization at large as to how all of us fit together. So I think it makes it easier for them. And it really helps the company address data challenges end to end. I hate one-stop shop. It's such an overused term, but that really is kind of what we are within that data management and governance entity.
Yeah, we always want it to be simple for the business, for sure, especially when it comes to engaging with them. Thank you. Miguel, how about yourself? What impact does it have on the business, the way that you've currently set up the governance?
I would say that having a clear boundaries between data management, data governance responsibilities, and teams will facilitate the labor to define data domains, data stewards, data champions, as well as prioritization for data management specific roadmap. Data management related activities can be expedited once data owners and stewards are defined and clear business goals are stated.
Yeah, amazing. Tom, how about yourself?
Yeah, I think like a good example is that we have a new SaaS product, and so we were trying to figure out what kind of role-based access control that customers need. And so I interviewed a whole bunch of them, and it seems like the lowest they need to go, or the base they need to have, is like table level permissions. And that's kind of technical answer, right? But that just show you like almost every single company I talk to now, rewind that 5 years ago, they're like, I have no idea. Now it's like they have at least a base understanding of what security is and what's the minimal for any kind of tool out there. What's the minimal that they need to be able to provide to make sure that, the right users in the company are seeing the right data. So.
Yeah. On that education and literacy piece, we'll certainly be touching on that a little bit later in the conversation for sure. Just a reminder to our audience, get those questions in if you have them. I'd love to ask them. Now, obviously, we've spoken there about the impacts it has on the business. What are some of the challenges that you've been facing when it comes to your current governance structure? What are some of the barriers, and potentially how you ended up in where you are with your current structure is because obviously you've overcome some challenges, I would assume. So I wonder if you can speak to some of the lessons you've learned from those challenges and what you've been experiencing. Miguel, I'll come to you first.
Yeah, I believe that the three main topics are, and that's based on my experience. The first one is going to be data literacy, something that you already mentioned. The second one is going to be the business engagement, business stakeholders engagement within the data, not only data management, but also data governance. And the third one is going to be, perhaps, that could be the most important one. In our case, is going to be the corporate culture. That's going to be important because it is not an easy task to infuse a data culture within an organization.
No, for sure. And when it comes to that data culture, how do you assess kind of where you are on that journey and what you can do? And how are you keeping tabs with where you currently are in terms of that culture?
Basically, we are running surveys all the time, and we are getting in touch with business stakeholders to evaluate what is the knowledge or perception that they are having regarding our data management, data science, and analytics initiatives that we are running, and always trying to provide them workshops, learning activities, specifically defined for different levels of within the organization. So we are deploying training for C-level, training for citizens, data scientists, and something like that. That's something that we are always moving and trying to promote internally to bring up that data knowledge level within the organization.
Yeah, for sure. Margie, how about yourself when it comes to the challenges that you've been facing with your governance structure and perhaps some of the lessons you've learned?
So some of the challenges that we have been faced with are, there's data siloed everywhere. It's all over the place. And there at times are not clear owners, or, data owner can, in some companies, data owner is kind of a bad term. So sometimes it's been difficult understanding who might be the right people, with the requisite knowledge to help us understand and begin to govern that data. Who are the people who are going to be the stewards? Largely in a federated model, stewards are volunteered or voluntold. So we have to balance the needs of their, full-time paying job, their needs to, revenue targets and everything else, along with how do we help govern the data better, so that you don't have, so maybe you will make more money. What is that sort of pivot point of investing in your data to improve quality, improve access, improve usability, and where does that tip the scale to improvement, where the cost of doing that is less than the cost that or the money that you're going to recoup in better insights, faster speed to market, all of those kinds of things. So it's a lot of that. It's a lot of organizational, and as Miguel was mentioning, it's change management, and it's changing and going from whatever the current corporate culture is to a data-driven culture and getting everyone aligned behind that. Those are probably the biggest challenges that I've seen.
Yeah, I want to pull that thread a little bit more. Do you think the term data owner is now outdated? Do you think it's problematic in terms of achieving what you want to do in a governance structure?
Yeah, I kind of do, especially when you talk about companies like mine that have shared data shared data sets. If I say I own this data and you think you own this data, all of a sudden we may have a conflict. Or if I say I'm a data owner, does that automatically mean that I can change it to meet my needs regardless of what your needs are? So I do kind of feel that that's maybe outdated. I like data steward. I like data partner. I like different terms besides that.
Yeah, no, I always think the language around these things is so crucial, because it very much, as you say there, owner it's a loaded term, right? And it also suggests that the owner sits with you as the owner to do something with that data, to look after it, to maintain it as well. And yeah, could get quite territorial potentially. which is
Correct.
certainly something we don't want to be fostering. We want that collaborative spirit for sure. Tom, how about you? What are you hearing on the ground when it comes to some of the pain points that people and customers experience with current governance structures?
I think another funny story, I deal with a different pharmaceutical company, and traditionally is data is kind of siloed in these different areas like Margie was talking about, and our software has a bunch of connectors so you can connect up to a bunch of stuff, just write SQL. And we implemented it, and then a couple weeks later I checked back with them and I said, how's it going? We had to shut it all down. Like, oh no, what happened? They're like, well, people had access to data they never had access to before, so people were going nuts, right, and all sorts of kind of stuff, and it was hilarious. And I was like, okay, well, I guess the compliance was just late to it because nobody invited them at all to what our software can actually do. So they had to shut it down and take baby steps. So that actually helped us like do implementations. Is tell during the sales process, it's like, no, invite your governors, tell them what our software can do, because that thing's kind of changed, and the cloud has really accelerated that as too. You throw everything on S3, everybody can come grab it. That's like a security nightmare for people. So I think that technology has really advanced in the last 5, 6, 7 years. And now it always seems like security and compliance is always a year or two behind, which is, I think they're getting better, but I still think technology is moving faster than these companies can provide guidelines and rules around all the data. So.
Yeah, and I've certainly heard in the same light that actually data governance gets a bit of a bad rap for, not enabling transformation, and they're kind of a blocker. And I think it comes to this conversation piece that you're saying there about bringing compliance on that journey very early on. It's a case of involve the data governance teams and data management teams very early on in what you're trying to achieve, so that you don't get to the point where everyone has to press the big red button to stop because we've not had these conversations, and in fact they can happen organically. What is the success stories that maybe you could share with that engagement level? Is there any particular tactics that you've seen customers use to ensure that everyone is around the same table having those discussions?
Yeah, it's just really us driving it. Like, I'm not really a salesperson, right? So the salesperson will like, Tom, be quiet, because I'll say, make sure you bring in security to this meeting. Make sure you're bringing in kind of data governance, because, granted, we may get the sale quicker if we don't, but the implementation is a complete disaster. It makes us look like a bad company. So let's just pull everybody in now to explain what everything does and stuff like that. And then, it's just like telling the truth, right? It's like, don't lie about anything. This is what our software does. If everybody come, and then there's no surprises later on. And that makes everybody's job just much easier. So.
Yeah, for sure. Now, in the spirit of things that can potentially, in some people's views, cause barriers and pain points, data regulation is obviously going to have a huge impact on all of our organizations, especially if you're global, if you're in many territories as well. So I wonder how much of an impact has current data regulation, and obviously future regulation, it was touched on in the panel just before as well, that there's incoming regulations very soon in some states as well. What impact is regulation having on your strategy with what we're talking about today? Miguel, take that one first for me.
Sure. I believe that it creates a big impact on data governance initiatives, as new roles like customer data protection officer are needed, as well as principles like privacy by design will be adopted. As data regulations become stronger, data management designs and deployment become more complex. The data management agility can be greatly impacted without the right data governance, privacy rules, and regulation principles stated.
Yeah, brilliant, Miguel. Margie, how about yourself when it comes to regulation in that current strategy?
In my world, regulation or new compliance laws are accelerators. Because the company's mandated to comply, and they have to comply generally in a short amount of time, and there's generally a concentrated budget that is put towards that. And because the whole company kind of has to lock arms and go in the same direction, we have leveraged GDPR and other, the new SREMs to those types of regulations. We've really used those to accelerate programs. We've used those to leverage identification of data stewards, data that we have been able to embed data by design and privacy by design principles into like our project management processes. So it really is a way to fund and mobilize in addressing these regulations. And then at the end of all of it, you also have this success that you can sort of report on. You know, the greatest way to get more folks on board and engaged in your program is to talk about how great it was. Get a soundbite of, yeah, with all of this work, we were able to do these other things. I was laughing at Tom about they had access to all this data. That's like my biggest nightmare is that they have access to all this data and they're so excited, but they don't know what to do with it. So we have been able to accomplish a lot in a short amount of time under the pressure that regulation can provide.
So is it fair to say that almost the regulation acts as a bit of a stick, but then the success of user cases then is the carrot to that scenario, and It's about applying that pressure kind of equally in some respects? Do you find that different functions need more of one than the other?
Yes. Different functions definitely do. I mean, you know, I look across our company and the various lines of business. They're like your kids. You've got some that are super compliant, that are happy to help, that are excited to be included. And you have others that are whiny and grumpy and don't want to participate at all. And so you just have to sort of deal with the different personalities of those different groups to get them all on board and tell the story differently, you know, figure out what their carrot is or chocolate bar or whatever it is and get them engaged.
Yeah. Well, I love what you just said there, whether it's a carrot or a chocolate bar, and really kind of understanding the business in that way, and kind of linking it again back to that culture of where are they on this journey. If they're further ahead, then it's going to be a bit of an easier sell for sure. Tom, how about yourself? What impact is data regulations having on many people's strategies from your perspective?
Well, I think before like HIPAA and GDPR, I used to work in healthcare. And the compliance, the teams and the healthcare companies, they ruled the roost. They could do whatever they want. And that was the first time I've actually seen people care about data quality and governance and stuff. And then we got into the Hadoop world where it was Wild West. Anybody can do whatever they want to. And then, you know, HIPAA and GDPR came through and people go, okay, wait, we can't just do whatever the heck we want to. So yeah, I think I'm not a big regulations and rules and, you know, government regulation kind of thing, but those were needed greatly, because people just didn't care. They gave data whatever they want to. And that was the biggest leaks that you had in these companies, where people were just walking off with data that they should have never had access to. And so I think that's, unfortunately, you have to have those rules in there, and then companies go, okay, I guess we'll actually do something now finally. So.
Amazing. Now, it's been mentioned across the festival, but then also earlier in the top of this conversation about data literacy, which we know has such a dramatic impact on data management and data governance as well. So I wonder if each of you could tell me a bit about the current data literacy programs that you have at place in the moment in your organizations, and maybe tell a bit of a story about that, kind of how it came about, why you've built it up in the way that you have, and how you're adapting it to better suit your organization. Tom, I wonder what you can tell me there.
Well, I think, you know, like I said before, we're starting to build in a lot of data governance tools and features into our product. So these are the kind of things that we're just trying to interview customers and find out what are people looking for? What are the minimum they're looking for? What are the maximum they're looking for? Just some real basic, you know, data governance with you know, stewardship and quality. I came from a data quality and data profiling background. To me, that's having that at your fingertips is very important. And then going out and looking for, you know, bad data, PII data, stuff like that people may not know that exist or is exposed out there. So being able to put that into our tools to make sure that it's easier for people to implement, especially if they're accessing all this data that they never could before. So.
Amazing. Miguel, how about you? What stories can you tell me about setting up data literacy in your organization?
Well, I believe that data literacy is a cornerstone for a successful data governance program. Without a strong data governance program, of course, data management initiatives will not have big chances to be successful. So we are running data literacy programs in parallel with the data governance program. And as I mentioned before, we are delivering data, specifically design training for different levels within the organization. It is our intention to promote that data culture at the C-level, at director's level, manager's level, and of course, specific technical training on different data topics for, you know, our stakeholders.
What are some of the specific trainings that you're referring to there? Is it a case that you're doing it by a particular use case, or is it a case of a different style of data? What can you add a bit of flavor to that?
Yeah, I can bring one specific use case as an example. We were dealing with customer attrition, and in there we were using predictive models. So we were using that specific use case to say, hey, if we are going to be talking about a predictive model, would be useful to define and teach our C-level executives what is the main difference between a descriptive model, a predictive, and a prescriptive model, right? What is the main difference between traditional analytics with deep analytics? What is the main difference with traditional analytics and eventually with neural network, for instance? Knowing that, they are going to see the difference. This is the approach that we are having to resolve this specific business pain point related with customer attrition. So that was a specific example on how we were, following that roadmap, teaching them how to deal or how to understand the terminology that eventually our data science team is going to be bringing on that conversation.
Now, was that a case that they came to you for that, or did you go to them and say, this is an important part of our maturity?
No, at the beginning, I had to go to them. They were not coming to me. So it wasn't me, being proactive. And I guess that you are not familiar with neural network, or eventually you have heard about that term, but eventually you don't know the difference or what is going on behind the scenes. So let me explain to you what a neural network means, or a predictive model means, and how we are going to be resolving this specific business pain point. That was more on me. It was more proactive, and because for them it's neural network. Oh yeah, that's sexy. That's a word that I have been listening all the time, but no more than that, right? So
yeah,
it was more proactive.
Yeah, I love that. I think more people in the audience will certainly have the faith to kind of wear that passion on their shirt and go out there and kind of spread the good word of data externally, rather than kind of waiting. Maybe you would have been waiting for quite a while if it was a case for them to come to you. But if you've made that first step, you've made that introduction, hopefully in the future they feel more empowered to come to you for questions, because you've kind of extended that relationship, right?
Yeah, it is important trying to break that black box concept. Everyone is talking about analytics, but show me the real concept behind the analytics, right?
Yeah, for sure. And then Margie, how about yourself when it comes to data literacy and standing that up in your organization? How's that looked for you?
So fortunately, it's part of my team. And I think that was intentional, putting data governance along with data literacy. So what you find across an organization, or a lot of organizations, is you've got pockets where you've got the data scientists, you've got the analysts. Those are your super data users. They get everything. They've forgotten more about data than I'll ever know. But then you have other areas who people will say, I don't use data. I just send emails and I use Word docs. And I'm like, well, that's data. So what we're working to try to do is to create sort of a bar, like a basic bar, like general fundamental knowledge about data at MasterCard. And this is all of the data, whether it be our transactional data, whether it be the data about you, but provide sort of that baseline. And then we look to sort of tease out specific use cases and users that need to use data in those use cases, and make sure that they're trained appropriately. And then, we try to give people bars and, accolades and different, data points that you're tied to, that you're beginner, advanced, or fundamental, or whatever, as we're building out the data program. So
yeah, potentially a bit of gamification in there as well if you've got levels.
Potentially, yes, but we haven't done that yet. But yes, that has been mentioned and contemplated, and it might be fun. Again, a lot of us, when we get those mandatory trainings, you're just like, ugh, no one wants to do it. So, we try to make things very, very creative. We're working with several different really cool creative agencies to make it more fun and definitely more interactive, so that as people are learning, it's actually enjoyable. It's not just watching some, talking head telling you all about data and why you need to care about data.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think we've all fallen victim to some pretty dry training at some point or another, and you know exactly how not to do it. And it is a case of, potentially, especially if you've got busy execs, or you've got people in the business who are experts at what they do, and you're bringing them over and you're sitting them down in front of a PowerPoint. It's a case of, like you say there, Margie, how can you make that more engaging so you get that buy-in? Now, earlier in the festival, we did cover this, and I'm keen to bring it into this session because it was mentioned earlier. How much, when we are talking about the data culture that we need to be data literate to achieve the things we want to achieve, and to make sure that that data governance and data management is really bought into and excelled and matured, how much do you think that has to align with your company culture as a whole, not just data culture, but company culture? What's your opinion on whether companies really need to own that data strategy and own that they are going to become data literate and data driven? Or do you think it's a case that potentially you could be fighting a losing battle unless that company owns that mission as its entirety, to bring everyone under that banner? Miguel, I wonder, what's your thoughts there?
I believe that all the data governance and data management and data analytics initiatives are going to be, I would say, perhaps the most important asset for a company today. It's going to be a strategic asset, and we should be looking to run that ourselves. That's I believe it, I have no doubts when I say that data is our most important and I would say priceless asset. So it should be strategic. If we can avoid sharing our data or using our data for the wrong purposes, or that would be a fundamental piece for our strategy. So It is going to be very important. I've seen a lot of vendors or initiatives that are basically requesting to share our data, so they're going to be providing additional insights. I think that we should be avoiding that and looking to deploy that kind of initiatives internally. The richness that we can get, the strategic difference that we can create as a company is going to be relying on that richness that data is going to be providing.
Yeah, well, I completely agree what you're saying there about data being an asset and kind of the future of any organization. I mean, you just have to do a quick search on any kind of recruitment platform, just type in data and see just how many roles include the word data, let alone actual data function roles. I think it's becoming a real focus for every single function and department throughout the business. So I completely agree there. Tom, how about yourself? When it comes to that wider company culture, do you think they need to own that data-driven culture, so that the data team aren't just kind of banging on a brick wall because everyone's united as part of this?
Yeah, and I think, again, it's based upon the type of company that I've dealt with, the startups, the younger companies. It's kind of Wild West. It's just kind of do whatever you want. But then I get, with more enterprise companies that have been around a while, they have more data governance in place, and it is part of their culture. So I think eventually those companies either learn the hard way, or they just grow into a company the size where they start to hire people and they realize that this is the way to go. So I think it's based upon the size of company that I've seen so far.
Margie, your thoughts?
So I think that part of it, so two parts. So first of all, I do believe, as Miguel and Tom have both said, that it needs to be part of that culture. In order to achieve a data-driven culture, you have to have literacy, you have to have governance, you have to have a data strategy. But you also have to have a business strategy that aligns with the data strategy. So if the lines of business can develop their business strategy, and then you have some data subject matter experts or more savvy data users to align that data strategy to the business strategy, I think that's where we've really seen synergy between the two, and where we've really seen that excel. And again, during that process, you're also educating those folks that are developing that data strategy or the business strategy as you're bringing them on board with the data strategy, and demonstrating how it aligns and how it propels that business strategy for success. So that's why I really think it's important. And it has to be top down. It absolutely has to be supported from top down.
Yeah, for sure. So when we think about what we've been talking about today in terms of that maturity of data governance and where we want to be in terms of that direction, over the last 2 years, we've obviously gone through so much. Many organizations have transformed the way they've done things. How has that impacted where you are in your governance and management journey? Has it impacted it at all? Has it been able to grow and innovate in new ways because the pandemic, or has it roughly stayed the same and stay on track? Margie, I'll go back to you for that one.
I don't know that I have a sense for that. I think that in some pockets it's grown, it's accelerated. Folks are we're using a lot of data maybe that we didn't have before the pandemic. I mean, Zoom and Slack and all these different types of communications that we rely on now. I think in some ways, as we're having additional regulations kind of come up, it was mentioned that regulation and compliance kind of follows innovation. I think that's kind of where we are now. So we're definitely seeing an increase there. But I don't know that I can say that one's really a lot more than the other. I feel like they're kind of keeping pace.
Yeah, really interesting. Miguel, how about you? Same question.
Well, I believe that we took the pandemic as an opportunity. People was getting locked down, getting bored. So we were bringing additional technical and functional challenges to the teams. So we had the chance to increase and grow. We were able to deploy new initiatives because of the pandemic. So we were providing technical challenges, and that was also used as a motivation for our teams. So we were bringing more use cases, providing more platforms and technical tools. The teams were able to jump in there, learn new things, and also bring in added value to the company. So we used the pandemic as an opportunity.
Yeah, amazing. Well, a fantastic silver lining to the situation for sure. Tom, how about you? What have you seen in terms of the people that you are having chats with day in, day out? Have you seen a difference since the pandemic era?
Yeah, I think it's actually, we've seen a lot of data mesh type of talk. A little bit less on the implementation side, but the data mesh part where you break things into domains and then data products underneath that, that's actually, in my opinion, much easier to govern because the people that are looking at those data products should be looking at those data products. So that actually makes things a little bit easier instead of putting everything in one massive data lake or data warehouse and just trying to figure out who's going to get what. Is you're breaking things, even if it's logically, down into basically domains and data products down there. And that's just easier lane to swim in for people. And then from there, you can branch out and give it to other places out there. So I think there's some data mesh is created for some other thing, but I always look at like the way of how you deliver that. So I think people are really starting to think about, okay, how I'm creating data or something like that. What is the first thing they're thinking is who's going to be able to access this data? And I think that's a big change from 10 years ago. It was the other way around. How quickly can I get this data out? But now it's like, okay, how can I get this data out quickly, but make sure that only the correct people are looking at it, especially after seeing all the data leaks in the last 10 years. So.
Amazing. So we've only got a few more minutes left of today's panel. And I always like ending on this question because I think it just brings into focus the entire discussion for our audience. And I do wonder for each of you, if perhaps you could give one key learning, one piece of advice, something to take with them at the end of this panel from all that we've spoken about today, because I realize we have darted between quite a few topics that sit naturally under governance and management. So yeah, perhaps one or two pieces of key advice. Miguel, take it away.
Yeah, I have 3 points. The first one is something that I have been talking about, data literacy. That's going to be really, really important for a successful, not only data governance, but also data management program. That's going to be one. The second one is always try to align the data initiatives with the business goals. That's going to be also really, really important. And the last one is going to be related with a specific role. That's going to be the translator or the data storyteller. That's going to be also very, very important because that role is going to be the liaison between the business and the technical teams. That's going to be a fundamental piece for a successful data management initiative.
Amazing, Miguel. Thank you so much for joining us today. Margie, how about yourself? That one piece of advice?
Yeah, one piece. I don't know that I have one. I'm kind of like Miguel. I probably have several. I absolutely agree. Literacy is huge. It's very, very foundational. If people really understand the impact of managing and governing data appropriately, that it's not the stick, as we said, if it really is more the chocolate bar or the carrot, they'll really understand, hey, if I make an investment here, I'm going to get a pretty decent return, or it's going to make my life easier. I'm going to be able to streamline or be more efficient, faster speed to market, those sorts of things, preventing against risk, preventing against disintermediation. Those are things that I've heard the panel talk about today. And that requires investment. It may not be sexy to invest in a foundational capability like data management or data governance, but it's very necessary. And there are so many ways to recoup that investment, and many non-invasive ways to embed data governance into current lines of business or into into project management processes or things like that, so that it isn't this big uptake. It's not this big onerous task for the relevant, product owners that need to adhere to that. And then again, I think, as Miguel said, align that business strategy to your data strategy. That's how you really get people, engaged and sort of moving in the right direction, is that you've provided to them what's in it for them and demonstrated how to achieve their goals.
Yeah, I love that soundbite. It may not be sexy, but it is crucial. Thank you, Logan, for joining us today. And then Tom, round us out. What are your pieces of advice? I'm going to say pieces because, apparently we're going for plurals, so that's totally fine for our audience today.
I think just really what's changed. I mean, I've implemented a tool called Metadata Manager from a quote unquote vendor 3 different times. And this is over like 8-9 years. And after a year, nobody's using it because companies never really it wasn't part of a budget, part of a project. So they never was like, oh, well, what's cool, we'll spend the money on it, but nobody ever wants to keep it up. And I think that's really changed and you didn't have these departments out there, for governance and risk before. So now it's like, it's part of data literacy. I was kind of reading something that Click had on here, and I don't see the word education in here. I think that's a big thing for data literacy, is just the education what the data is, but education, what if this data got out? What if it got into the wrong hands and that type of stuff? I think that needs to be part of each of those projects that are out there. It doesn't need to be some arching, like a department that's trying to like figure everything out. It should just be part of your culture. And I think just really the biggest part is just making sure people are only seeing the data that they should see. So.
Yeah, amazing. Well, what a great soundbite to end on there. Well, thank you to each of you for joining me today. It's been a really, really very insightful panel.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Nice to meet everybody.
Thank you.
Amazing. So we are now going to be heading slowly but surely into our final session. We will be back in a few moments.